Hey everybody, welcome to another one of my poorly written, badly edited, blooper-riddled videos. I want to take a few minutes, probably more than a few minutes, talking about something I see people struggle with, and that is basic knobology, buttonology of how to work their navigation and communication radios. Specifically, where's the right volume knob when I can't hear something? I want to switch from one radio to the next one. I see a lot of people just kind of randomly stabbing around at buttons on the audio panel, and hopefully we can make a little bit more efficient use of our radios by the end of this. I do have a lot to cover, so I'm going to talk really fast. Feel free to pause and rewind, and let's dive right in. So the airplane we're in today has two navigation communication radios. The airplane you're flying might only have one, may have two comms, one nav, just depends. So today we've got two NavComms. Our first NavComm is actually built here into our GPS box. We're just going to be dealing with the NavComm side of things. We're not going to talk anything GPS, which is over here on the right. All these buttons and knobs help drive the GPS functions. So we're going to stay over here. Our second NavComm is this box down here. Moving all the way over to the right, we will need to see everything on it. And then we also have our audio panel up here on the top. And this is where I see most people struggle, actually, is trying to figure out which button I'm supposed to be pushing to figure out what radio I'm talking and listening on. So we're going to keep coming back to that as well during the video.
630. Wind.
Hey, there's ground talking right now. See, it says RX. All right, so let's consider each radio we have in our airplane, COM 1 and COM 2, to be telephones. Picture two telephones just sitting on a desk. I can pick both of them up, hold them up to my head. Well, I'm not going to do that. That's going to look really ridiculous. So we really only talk on one telephone at a time, either COM 1 or COM 2. And we drive that up here with our audio panel with these mic buttons. Okay? You can see I'm talking and listening on COM 2. I can listen to more than one thing at a time. I can only talk on one, but I can listen to more than one thing at a time. And that's these top buttons here. I can light all them up like a Christmas tree. Oh boy. That's a lot of noise. And we'll see when it's appropriate to push those. Most operations, communication-wise, you're just going to work these buttons. So I'm talking and listening to COM 2, which happens to be ground control here, 121.9. Let's say it's time to call the tower, 1213, and take off. I'm just going to push COM 1 mic. And look, everything came over. I'm now talking and listening to the active frequency in COM 1. All right, there's a term I haven't explained yet, active frequency. With these two radios in this airplane, not only do I have two telephones, I actually have two frequencies on each telephone. There's an active and a standby. Active is who I'm talking to right now. I can push the top, ground control is going to hear me. We may hear them talk back, just like a second ago. The standby is like they're on hold. I've got them in my hip pocket, but I can't quite hear them yet. But I can dial in frequencies and have it ready to go. To switch it over, let's say it's time to get my ATIS. I'm just fired up the airplane. I can hit this little flip-flop button. And now ATIS 127.65 is in the active. And I put ground control on hold. And hopefully you can hear that through the speaker. And you should have seen me bring up the volume there. If you can see, I don't know if you can see that very well, it says volume right next to this COM knob. So if I can't hear something on the radio that I am dealing with, which back up here on the lights, which radio are we dealing with? We're dealing with COM 2. Do the volume knob on that radio. I see a lot of people come up here and try working the volume knob on the audio panel. Watch this. All right. You don't hear any change in the volume, do you? All right. I'm going to get him out of my ear for just a second. So your volume knobs up here are strictly for the intercom. It's for the people sitting in the airplane. So if you're flying and your instructor's getting way too loud, you can just sit here and you can turn him down and get him out of your ear. That's always a handy feature. No, don't do that. I'm not recommending that. So that's the volume, and this bigger knob back here is the squelch. That drives, oh, what's a good way to explain that? How the voice activation gate, the noise gate, will kick in. If you turn that counterclockwise, you can talk really soft and everybody will be able to hear you, but it lets a lot of ambient noise in. Turn it clockwise until that just general hiss or static is removed from your headset, and you don't have to yell into the microphone to get the voice activation to kick in. On the other side, you have similar knobs for the co-pilot, volume and squelch, and you won't be able to see me do it, but I can pull that straight out, and that actually will then run the volume for the backseat passengers. So if they're complaining about the volume, you can set it that way. Push that back in. All right, so we saw how to flip frequencies on our comm radio. We saw how to adjust our volume. Let's do the same thing up here on our number 1 radio. So we're gonna go up here. So now we're talking and listening to tower. We've got 12615, which is our local radar guy, and our standby. Notice it doesn't say active and standby like this radio does. If you're ever not sure which one is which, you can take your knobs that would change your frequency, and you're never going to dial right over the top of your active frequency when you have active standbys. In older radios where you don't have an active standby, you just have one display, you would dial as you spin the knobs and change the frequency of what you're talking to. The nice thing about these is I can load something up ahead of time and not have it impact who I'm actually talking to. So you can set your frequency, and then if you want to flip that up, we've took off, it's time to call up departure. Here's that flip-flop button. We are now talking and listening to 126.15. And if you want to set the volume on it, it's really hard to see, but underneath here it says volume. And I can tap it to actually turn off the squelch. Set the volume wherever I want. Again, this knob does nothing for your radios, just for your intercom. I guess I should backpedal a bit. We never saw us dial frequencies on the number 2 radio. Sorry about that. Let's say we want to put in tower control down here. We've got this big outer knob and a little inner knob. Big knob changes big numbers. Everything to the left of the decimal. There's my 121. This little knob, it's longer, but it's the smaller diameter one, changes numbers to the right of the decimal. Little knob, little numbers. There's tower. When you hit our flip-flop. And now we've got 1213 in the active. But I'm not talking and listening to them. Look at where my lights are up here. I'm still talking and listening to approach departure. So if I'm coming back into the airport and I did all that and I hit my push to talk switch, Springfield Tower, 2182 Bravo's back in from the practice area. Well, I would have been transmitting on approach. Our approach would have said, hey to Bravo, you're still on approach. Contact tower 121.3. You went, oh shoot, sorry about that. There we go. Now we're talking and listening to tower. Something else that can kind of clue you in on what you're transmitting on is, I'm actually going to do a quick little, I'm just going to push the push to talk for a second. We don't have a hand mic in here. I don't want to upset Springfield. Actually, you know what? Let's do this. Let's dial up a CTAF frequency just so we don't interfere with the local radar guy. So now we are talking and listening to kind of a generic CTAF frequency. I'm going to hit the push to talk switch, and I want you to look at what shows up right here. See, TX, we're transmitting. At the same time, look at the mic button up here. It blinks. So if you hit your push to talk switch and you don't see those things happen, most likely your push to talk switch isn't working. Could be a good explanation about why nobody's hollering back at you. Okay, how's that look on the top radio? Same exact thing. 2.8. We hear a flip-flop. We're going to talk and listen here. So this should blink, and I should see a TX over here. There we go. The radios you have in your airplane might not have those transmit indicators. They may just have a T, there may be nothing, but if it has it, that's a good indication of if your push-to-talk mechanism is actually working. All right, so we've covered communications. Let's dive into the navigation radios, right? We want to tune over here, if you look to the left just a little bit, our good old VOR heads, right? So let's start with our number 1 radio. We had a COM and a nav radio. This says VLOC for VOR localizer. There is an active and a standby frequency, just like communications. So right now, this head over here is listening to 108.0, which is nothing around here. That's why it's flagged. So let's say I want to dial in the Springfield VOR, which is 112.7. Okay, I can use these same knobs. Oh, what is that changing? Changing my COM frequency, because that's where the little cursor is. See that highlighting? I need to move that down here so that these knobs will change VOR type frequencies. Read what that little label says right there. Push for COM VOR. So I'm going to push that and watch where that highlighting goes. There we go. Down here in the VLOC or VOR section. So I should be able to, big knob, big numbers, little knob, little numbers. I'm going to take the long way around. That's still the standby. I have to flip it up into the active. And I don't know if it'll work in the hangar here or not. There you go, it unflagged. And you can twist that, and we're not going to go into VOR navigation. That's a whole nother video. But it looks like the VOR is kind of northwest of where we're sitting here in the hangar. Okay? That's 2 items. We've tuned, we've twisted, but we need to do one more thing to ensure that this is a reliable navigation signal, and to make sure we've got the right frequency dialed in the first place. We need to listen to the Morse code identification. And I don't know if you saw what just happened there. That cursor automatically flipped back up into the COM, and I didn't push anything. After about 30 seconds or so, this Garmin 430 will do that, because more often than not, you're messing with COM frequencies anyway. If you want to get it back again, you can push it down and have more fun down there. So I need to hear the Morse code identification. And I don't know if you can zoom in. Can you see what it says right underneath the volume knob for the nav? This was the volume knob for our COM. Here's the volume knob for our nav. Look what it says there. Push for ID. So I'm going to push that. No, it even says ID. Okay, but I don't hear anything. So no matter what radio you use, it's going to be a 2-step process. You tell the nav radio to start spitting out the Morse code, but now I need to allow it into my headset. Well, what's coming into our headset right now? Just COM 1. If you pull the camera back a little bit, do we have anything else lit up on the top? No, we don't. I need to hear what's going on in this nav radio. Was this nav 1 or nav 2? Do you remember? Hopefully y'all said nav 1. So I'm going to push nav 1. Oh, there we go. Let's give that a listen. Come on. There you go. I hear the Morse code. It's suitable for navigation. And you look at your dits and dashes and make sure you dial the right frequency in as well. I'm going to let it start doing it, and then I'm going to touch that button. Now notice when I did that, the Morse code cut out, but I still got all that static in my ear. Okay? And I'm going to get that out of my ear just to make it quieter. If you need to use the VOR for the purpose of just listening to stuff, some airports broadcast their weather, their AWOS, over a local VOR frequency. So you can't use a communication set of frequencies. You would actually need to dial it into a nav radio, 1 or 2, and we'll show the nav 2 here in just a second, and then press the appropriate button up here to be able to listen to it. So the only time you really need to tap this guy is if you need to also hear that Morse code identifier. Let's see how to do that down here. We want to use our nav2 radio to talk to this head, if you pan to the left just a little bit, this course deviation indicator. All right. So back on the radio, you see it only shows comms. We'll go back to the right a little bit. So I need to get to nav stuff. And there's kind of two ways to do it. There's a nice convenient comm nav button, and it's just a two-way toggle. We're on comms. Look, there's navigation frequencies. Back to comms, back to navs. It's just a light switch, two-way toggle. The other way is, here we are in comm mode. I've got a volume knob for the comms. Just like up here, I had a volume knob for the comms. Up here, I had a volume knob for nav 1. We've got a volume knob for nav 2. And if I tweak it just a little bit, look, it's suddenly brought up navigation frequencies. If I turn the comm one a little bit, it goes back to comms. So there's two ways you can toggle back and forth between am I in comm mode or nav mode, just for the display aspect. Okay, so let's go back to nav mode. And it looks like we already have Springfield dialed in here. If we didn't, we could dial it in on this side. Let's say we want to dial in Jacksonville's old VOR, which I think is decommissioned now, but we could dial that in, flip it over, and that frequency would now be talking to our head. And it is flagged. One, because they decommissioned the VOR, and two, it's 25 miles away. We'll never see it. So I want to use Springfield's VOR like I did on the top. So we'll come back to our radio, and it's in the standby. So we'll hit our flip-flop, bring it over, and now if you look at the CDI, it's unflagged, and it better match up pretty close to what the top one is. There we go. About 305, 306. Great. I need to listen to the Morse code identifier down here. Same exact idea. If you read, it might be really hard to read under it, but that also says push for ID. So we're going to push it just like we did on the top radio. ID. I don't hear anything. Turn the volume up, still don't hear anything, because I need to get it into my headset up here. And we should hear the same Morse code identifier. There we are. When we're done, turn off the radio and get that out of our ear. So there's working your frequencies, your active standbys in each radio, how to work your navigation frequencies, active and standby, in each radio, and then how to listen to them as appropriate. We got about 16 minutes in the video here. I just want to take 1 second and walk through one more scenario that I do see a lot of people, I don't want to say struggle with. I think there's a more efficient way to work your comms. Let's say that we are sitting here on the ground. All right, we just fired the airplane up and it's time to get the ATIS. So we've got, let's make this a little more realistic here. Dramatic pause while I set up a couple radios. 12615. We put in 1219. There we go. So we are talking and listening to ground. That's the first person I'm going to talk to, right, as I'm taxiing out. But I got to get the weather first. Okay? I could dial it in the standby. Maybe I want to put it down here in my bottom radio for whatever reason. So I'm going to do that. 127.65. We flip it over. Now, I want to listen to that. What I see a lot of people do is they come up here and they'll hit this small button. Just like we listened to navigation stuff in addition to the thing we were listening to here, I can do that. All right, there it is. But now, if somebody starts talking on ground, and as luck would have it, now nobody's talking, I can hit this squelch to add some noise. All right, that's just a lot of stuff in my ear. So sitting here on the ground, I don't need to talk to ground yet. I don't need to talk to tower yet. I just need to listen to one thing. So hit the mic 2 button. Look, what's the only thing I'm listening to? Comm 2, the ATIS. I'm gonna turn it down for a second. Some people get a little worried about hitting that mic button because you don't ever talk on the ATIS frequency. Okay, that's fine. Just don't push the talk switch. But I am only listening to the one thing that I want. It's a lot cleaner. I'll be able to hear it, get it listened to in one nice little lap. The time where you would want to do that is, let's say you're out in the practice area, and it's time to come back into the airport. Well, I can't just, let's get that back in the active there. I can't just go like this. All right. I can hear the ATIS, but I can't hear approach departure anymore. I can't hear my ATC guy. And that is the moment where they would holler at me and tell me there's traffic or tell me to turn or who knows what. So I need to do one of two things. Ask them for permission to leave the frequency, and then I could do that, get my weather, and then come back with them. Or I would hit this top button, get my weather, while still also allocating a few brain cells to listen to air traffic control in case they need to holler at me. Sometimes it's a little harder, it can be a little noisier, but I need to be able to listen to air traffic control. Well, I apologize for that video going as long as it did. I did have quite a bit that I wanted to cover though. Everything from intro level stuff for newer student pilots and up to hopefully a couple tips and tricks that more experienced pilots might find useful. Hopefully I achieved that goal. So if you have any questions, comments, or smart remarks, let me know. Thanks for watching.